Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I am your host, Paul O'Need, and today I am joined for round two, Coach Joe Connolly. What's up, man?
What's going on, brother? Good to be back.
Yeah, we're a little bit different this time. Last time we focused a lot on coaching, we focused a lot on the collegiate sector. And for those of you, well, no one knows, but I've been coaching Joe. I've been coaching Joe behind the scenes for the last 5 months. He came to me with the goal of, hey, let's try to get dick skin shredded and let's do it in a way that is somewhat sustainable. So I wanted to have him back on the podcast to talk about that journey. We're still in the process. We're down 34 pounds since July 9th. We were at 239. Now we're at 205. We're sitting under 10% body fat, which, being drug free is a very, very low body fat percentage to sit at. And there have been some hiccups along the way. There have been some challenges. I mean, Joe's schedule itself is a challenge, but he's managed to do it all while continuing to be present as a coach, present as a father, and showing up for everyone in his life. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to just chat about the process.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's been my face doesn't take up as much of the screen as it used to. That's kind of the one compliment I get more than anything else is just my head and my face look completely different than they used to. So that's which is a positive because I'm pretty sure I had the head shaped like a pumpkin before. So,
dude, when I diet, I have to bring my hat, my hats that I wear, they have to get smaller.
Yeah,
That's
I've gone.
So
I was a 3 on here, and now I'm a 5.
That's amazing. Just losing all the fat from your head, eh?
Yeah, face and head and neck and everything. Not
at least
clothes don't fit.
At least you don't have the diet face yet, like that sunken cheek look.
No, not too bad. It's getting there. If I didn't have the beard, it's a little bit there, but honestly, I don't mind it. I kind of like it.
I think it makes us look younger.
Who knows?
So let's start off. Like, what was the motivation? Because I want to start from the beginning. Like, what was the motivation to get so lean? You've achieved, you ran a marathon, you deadlifted over 600, you've squatted over 600. There's a lot of achievements from an athletic standpoint that you've been able to check off the bucket list, but getting super lean hasn't been one of them up to now. Why choose that as a goal?
I think that I've always been somebody that kind of looks for things that are really difficult to do from like personally really difficult, and I've always been a larger guy, and I've always been cognizant of my weight, whether it be being in weight classes in powerlifting or in Olympic weightlifting or whatever, but I've never taken it to the place we are now. And every person that I've talked to along the way that has kind of done that has been like, man, it was one of the hardest things, that I ever had to do. And it's not only physically hard, but it's mentally challenging in the grind and all that stuff. And for me, those are always things that I like to lean into. I enjoy challenging myself, and I can't do all the crazy athletic stuff as much anymore. I think my days of squatting 700 and pulling 700 or over or benching 5, like those are gone maybe. But I can certainly still do a lot of other things,
Absolutely.
that are still challenging and different and take me out of my comfort zone. And I knew I needed help through the process just because it's not something that I've ever done. And that's why we kind of started talking about it, and it became kind of a thing.
Yeah, it was like shortly after you and I did a podcast together, I posted a picture and you're like, bro, I want to look like that.
Yeah.
All right, let's fucking do it. I think it's important to talk first about the motivations, because I think a lot of people have these ideas of like, oh, I want to do this or I want to do that. but they don't actually dial into how that goal fits into the framework of their life. And that's one thing you and I spoke about early on. I was very straight up to say, losing this much body fat is going to put a strain on every aspect of your life. You have to make sure that you really want it, or else any opportunity that you're given for an out, you're going to take it. Have you noticed, I'm sure the first 10, 15 pounds was probably pretty seamless, but where was that point for you where you were like, hey, this is kind of hard and my mentality is being tested?
I think it was probably end of July, at the end of our summer training session, and then into August when our schedule changed quite a bit, and then I was in fall camp, still
Mm,
coaching, still working 65, 70, 75 hours a week. Um, and then probably again when the season started and things changed a little bit from a schedule perspective. And then probably the most challenging most recently,
mhm,
was some of the dietary changes that we did, adding in the 2 days, which I'm sure we'll get into, versus kind of the one stable way of eating. Was I mean those just immediately jump out at me as, hey, all right, I gotta spend some time getting organized here and make sure all my ducks are in a row, my food's right, all everything's okay,
mhm.
so that I can feel good about this process moving forward. That those were kind of some of the hiccups along the way for me.
Yeah. So whenever there's like a big change, whether it be to your
Yeah,
schedule or to the protocol, and then to put that
yeah.
into perspective for people, in that August timeframe, we were down about 10 pounds. And then when the season started, that's when fat loss actually ramped up pretty significantly. We've been dropping, over a pound a week since then. So we look at September 4th, you were 10 pounds down from where we start, or sorry, 14 pounds down from where we started, and then by October, we were over 20 pounds down. So September was a big kick up in physical activity. It was a big kick up in calorie deficit, and it was combined with the schedule. um, when we look at like the X's and O's of the way we strategize the diet, I think it's important to discuss kind of what your diet looked like before we started. Like you definitely had a very clean diet. You were eating a lot of single ingredient whole foods. There wasn't a lot of what I would call like treats or cheat meals. You were always very cognizant of your nutrition from a quality standpoint, but there wasn't much attention paid to uh, quantity or distribution of macros. You just made sure that you ate a shit ton of protein and then filled in the gaps. What would a typical day of eating look like for you when we first started?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was always, bunch of eggs in the morning, with however much kind of oatmeal or potatoes or grits or carbohydrates I could kind of fire down, you know, sauces and things on top. And then I'd usually always try to eat 5 times a day.
Mhm.
Whether it be two of them being a protein shake or three of them being a protein shake. Lunch was always, a big meal. I would always have, two chicken breasts, a big piece of steak. I didn't eat a ton of vegetables. I ate a
Yeah, I
lot more
remember.
fats.
I remember.
That that was a big thing. I was probably eating. I mean, in all seriousness, I was probably eating 100 to 200 grams of fat a day.
Oh,
On
easily. Yep.
on top of 200 to 250 grams of protein. um I'd have a shake or something in the afternoon, maybe, or an earlier dinner. Same thing. A lot of times I would always get like a meal prep company or something, so I would have mega fits, or I would have vertical diet stuff ready just because of the schedule and stuff like that. So I would fire that down, and I'd always have a pre-bed shake. So I think the foundation for the structure of the day was there. I just
Yeah.
think the details of it were not dialed in very much. I've tried I've tried more keto style. I've always been a little bit more sort of, I don't know, drawn towards that a little bit. I think initially when we first started, I was eating more carbohydrates than I was used to,
Oh yeah.
which, uh, was a change for me. And that's not, I mean, obviously it inherently worked great. And now, so it sort of changed my perception of some things as well,
Mhm.
from performance and how I feel and, how my brain operates and kind of all those things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember when we first started, you had a bit of an aversion to tracking. You were like, "Yeah, I've done it. I don't really want to do it." And this was before we had decided to take a full run at getting super lean.
Yep.
Um, and we worked on. I remember right away. I was like, "You're eating too many fats. We need to switch you to carbs." And we went to more like a behavioral style approach, where I gave you some approved foods, so you could choose from those foods. I made sure to give you some guidelines in terms of, hey, we need 800 to 1,000 grams of fruit and vegetables a day, which was a huge adjustment for you. We want to make sure that we're having, some fermented foods in the diet. We want to make sure that we're drinking a certain amount of water. Those things weren't hard for you, but they were a change. And so whenever there's a change in what you've been doing, there is friction attached to it. So there's a little bit of extra planning, a little bit of extra thought, a little bit of extra bandwidth. And for someone like yourself who expends a lot of bandwidth in their day-to-day activities, being a father, being a coach, being a husband, it's a lot to ask initially. And so I think the fact that we took it slow at the start and focused on the behaviors really set the tone for what was going to happen later on. And I think, the biasing of fats versus carbohydrates, I think as strength athletes, like you've been a strength athlete your whole life. And even when you were doing endurance training, having a higher fat diet with endurance training isn't necessarily a bad thing because the primary fuel source for endurance training is fats. So if you're fat adapted, quote unquote, even if you're eating a little bit of carbohydrates, you're more satiated, which for those long days is going to be helpful. And you're able to cram in way more calories with less food volume. So when I come in and I say, hey, listen, we're going to drop your fats, we're going to bump your carbs, we're going to bump your vegetables. Now we have this massive spike in food volume, and it was an adjustment for you from the beginning. Then we started tracking. And when we started tracking, that's when, things really hit the ground running and that the fat just started coming off of you. Was it a bit of a shock to you that you were eating so many carbohydrates and your body weight was coming down?
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. I think that there's a preconceived notion among a lot of people about carbohydrates and how they're inherently poor for body composition, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I knew that, um, but I was, you know, I had a preconceived notion, and I think that was shattered. I also think that uh, I don't know as though I will ever not track my food ever again.
It's
In that,
yeah.
in the beginning, you're right. I was like, let's just start with a few things, see how we do, and I absolutely love it because it gives me such a tremendous insight into what I'm actually doing. It holds me accountable. It's really easy to do
Mhm.
with the app, and I just don't know if I'll ever not do it because I've just it's we've seen so much growth and success in a short time.
Yeah, I'm what I would call like a lazy tracker. So what I typically do is I know what my macros are and I build out like like pretty much like a meal plan for myself. And so I track for like 1 or 2 days and then I just eat the same shit. And then as soon as my macros change, I just track for 1 or 2 days and then then I do the same shit. But
Right.
where tracking becomes so important is when you are focused on performance and you have a bad training session, that's one variable that you can look at and say like, nope, I ate what I was supposed to. So it has to be sleep. It has to be stress. It has to be maybe training volume accumulation. It has to be something else because it
Right.
can't be the food. Um, and then when you combine that with a busy lifestyle and being a dad, One of the things that I talk about with a lot of my clients who have children is like, if your child offers you food, eat the food. Like, how how have you managed the flexibility aspect of tracking with being a father? Because you've got two young girls, right?
I have a daughter and a son,
A daughter and
four
a
and
son.
two.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
4 and 2. So the lessons that you are teaching them through your actions are going to stick with them through the rest of your life. How has the commitment to tracking kind of influenced that relationship?
Yeah, I think it's been certainly challenging. I think the biggest thing is that I think worked in my favor is that my wife obviously also is sort of in this type of world and understands all that. And, we don't have like we all sit down and eat at the same time. But even before this, oftentimes I would prepare my food, she would prepare her food,
Okay.
and we would both prepare the kids' food. And so we were already sort of accustomed to having some individuality in there for what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was one day she got mad at me. It was my daughter's birthday, and she offered me she made her a cake, and she offered me a piece of cake, and I took a little bit, and I didn't eat the whole slice. And we got done, and she's like, "Are you serious? Like you?" And she was right,
Yeah.
like to your point, when your 4-year-old offers you a piece of cake, you eat it on her birthday. And
Mm-hmm.
that was me kind of taking a step back and being like, "All right, well, yeah, but again, being able to track, you can just backfill that and
Yep.
understand that. All right, yeah, I'm ahead of the game here. All right, I'll just take this out later, and now I'm still on course. So there was a lot of flexibility in there.
Exactly. And I think teaching your kids early on in their lives that, like, hey, food is fuel, but food is also something that we enjoy as a family. It's something that bonds us together. Um, and when you do have I mean, Jocko says it all the time, discipline equals freedom. So if you're disciplined in your nutrition tracking, it gives you the freedom to enjoy some treats once in a while.
Mhm.
The challenge comes in like you've got some days where you're under 2,000 calories. That doesn't really leave a lot of room for treats. But you've also got some days where you're like 26, 2,700 calories, where now you have a
Right.
little bit more space. And that's only been recently. Prior to that, we were up close to 3,000 and still losing weight. Um, that's another thing people don't realize, that when you leverage a higher protein intake, you can eat more total calories. You're also more satiated. So we
Mhm.
used a lot of different tools in our approach together. And I think this is where we'll get into the X's and O's. So when we first started tracking, we started using what I would call a stable diet. So we established macros and we established a level of adherence that we're comfortable with. One of the things that I think coaches get too tied on is perfection. So whenever I give a client macros, let's say it's 3,000 calories, 250 grams of protein, whatever carbs, whatever fats. In that 3,000 calories, I'm kind of assuming for a plus or minus 100 calories. Like it's never going to be perfect,
Right.
but we're aiming for as close to that as possible. Whenever I see people like, oh, I cut up an apple and ate a third of it, I'm like, oh my god, just eat the fucking apple. Like, um, and this is coming from someone who's prepped for a bodybuilding show and tracked one apple and not tracked 137 grams of apple, whatever it might be. Um, so there's that piece to it where you have the flexibility, and then the stable macros day to day make it really, really simple. And we got far with that. The challenge then becomes the most important aspect of your ability to lose fat and maintain your muscle mass, which for you, we actually built muscle during the diet for the majority of it until recently, is we need to fuel performance.
Yeah.
Performance has to be the number one metric. You were dealing with a couple injuries, but how would
Yep.
you compare like the training stimulus as we progressed through this diet? Like, talk to me a little bit about your training.
Yeah, I think my training has been pretty stable the entire time. Obviously, we're doing a little bit more of a hypertrophy style type of training,
Mhm.
with a little bit of sort of power building sprinkled in. But I've stayed away from a lot of the, major powerlifting type movements for the most part, because ultimately we want volume, we want blood flow, we want the pump
Mhm.
throughout the process. And I've been pretty consistent with that. There's been a few times where I'd reach out to you and be like, "Oh man, like
Yep.
that was just flat today," or I didn't, and you gave me some ideas on how to kind of fix that, and some tricks of the trade to
Mhm.
kind of bump things up, or that sort of way. The I got an AC joint that's bad, and it's been bad for a while, and so I got to figure out ways to work around it in regards to horizontal pressing and overhead pressing. And I've found some ways to do that, to be able to still train the shoulders, still train the chest, and but I don't think that had anything to do with
Mm.
the diet or our process. That was there before, and it'll
Right.
probably be there after. And um, yeah, I think it's been it's been pretty consistent, with the exception of probably a handful of days where I might have screwed something up, or my schedule is like, all right, I got to train right now. I got to train
Mhm.
fasted right now. All right, let's see how we do. Like,
Yep.
and again, is it better to not train that day and or train that night or whatever? But I'm always been somebody that's just like, no, I got an hour. Like, I'm gonna go get
Yeah.
after it real quick, and I don't have
Routine.
time to eat. I'm just going. But it's been really good.
Yeah. The the routine of getting the training in to me is extremely important. Like if you have to train on that day and things come up, for me, I would always opt to check the box versus push it back, especially for
Right.
people who are busy, because the chances of you potentially having to push it back again are going to be really high. So I'd rather you just get the session in, and then we establish, what the result of that was, what data we can collect from it, and how we use it moving forward.
Right.
I think leveraging a higher carbohydrate intake throughout the diet really does allow those glycogen stores to stay a little bit more full. That being said, recently, probably within the last month, the frequency of those flat sessions went up. And so
Mhm.
as a coach, you have to look at, okay, calories are coming down. He's reporting that his training intensity is falling off. That is an immediate red flag for me as the nutrition coach to say, we need to make sure that this doesn't happen. We need to get his training intensity back up. How do we do that? And so the key for me was, all right, we're going to go to a high low mix where we have a training day diet and a rest day diet. For some people with their lifestyle, they can't do that. The stress of planning different macros on different days just doesn't fit with their lifestyle, and that's okay. This is just a tool. But for you, you knew that you were training on these days, you knew that you're resting on these days, and yeah, I mean the rigidity of your work schedule kind of makes it such that you're able to plan.
Right.
So what we did is we pulled down carbs really low on the rest days, brought fats up a little bit, and brought calories down. So we're in a really steep deficit on 3 of the days of the week. And then we're actually probably eating at maintenance on those other days of the week. But because those carbohydrates are higher, those fats are lower, the glycogen stores can be more full. And then we can sustain that training output. I mean, the beauty for me as a nutrition coach working with someone like yourself is I don't have to worry about you not knowing how to train. I mean, there are a few things here and there that you just never dealt with, especially on the dieting side, where yeah, you're probably going to lose your top end strength pretty quickly. And that has to
Mhm.
do with, I mean, your joints are smaller, your surface area is smaller, your stomach is smaller. So there's less ability to stabilize under load with internally stabilized movements. But you are also slightly depleted at all times, which is par for the course. So, hey, let's use some tempo training. Let's use some isometrics. Let's try to get a stimulus in with as light weights as possible, and you mentioned staying away from the more competition movements. That's one thing that I do inherently more so for my ego. because I don't want to see my squat go down. I don't want to see. I mean, it's 0 right now, so I don't think it could go down anymore. But I don't want to see my bench go down or my deadlift go down. So I'll RDL or I'll split squat or I'll leg press or hack squat or do something different. Um, and it just kind of makes the process a little less egocentric, and you can just train to train.
Yeah,
And
I think you're right on the money. I think early on in our process, I was still kind of hanging on to that because that's how I've trained for so long.
mhm,
And at one point in time, the bench fell off because the AC joint was acting up, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna hit stick the dumbbells. We're good there." And then I think I messaged you, and I'm like, "Man, I'm having trouble bracing under load." And you're like, "Yeah, dude, get rid of that. Like, you got
yep,
no waste anymore." I'm like, "All right, you're right." So then the deadlift was kind of the last thing, and I can still do that.
yep,
Although it's kind of not as often right now.
mhm,
But yeah, I think, to your point, especially somebody with a background like we have, to see those things disappear has certainly been a hit to the ego. But, you sit back and you think about, well, what's the goal here?
yep,
Right. And understand that you committed to this process for a reason. What is the reason? Are we still moving in the right direction towards that reason? Okay, we're still doing what we need to do,
exactly.
and but yeah, it's certainly been an interesting process to lose those things. um
Temporarily, temporary.
Temporarily is right. Yeah,
Yep, they're
they'll
going to
they'll,
come
they'll
back.
all come back, but
I think that the coolest part of the process for me was actually seeing that, lean muscle mass came up for a good period and then stabilized. Only
yeah.
recently did we have a small drop. And for those of you listening, the reason I know that is because Joe has access to an in body. So an in body is basically a high level bioelectrical impedance that will measure his body fat through his whole body, his lean tissue, water mass, things of that nature. And we've been using those monthly to kind of gauge the approach and how effective we've been. We saw some insane drops in visceral fat, which I was blown away.
Yeah.
Um, and this is coming from like at 240, you were a well put together 240. Like you weren't a fat 240. So to see that visceral fat come down so much, I'm really curious to see how your blood work's going to look after this. Um, Especially from an insulin sensitivity standpoint and from a cholesterol standpoint. I think those are going to be really important metrics. And that brings into account like one of the real benefits of doing a fat loss phase like this. I was speaking to a friend of mine, John Heck, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Big John and I have become pretty good friends, and he does a really deep diet once a year. And the biggest reason he does it, obviously, he wants to look like a freak, which I mean, he's 6'7", 300 pounds. So it's kind of par for the course.
Not hard. Yeah.
Not
Not
hard.
hard.
But one of the reasons he does it is because he wants to make sure that his blood work stays in a great spot all year long. And one deep diet can last you a full year
Yeah.
because when you start pushing food up, well, that's when your blood work is probably going to take a hit. One of the
Hmm.
best ways to improve your blood work, improve your digestion, improve your insulin sensitivity, improve your cognition is to be in a caloric deficit. Um, have you felt from I mean, let's talk until a week from or until a month passed, until the last month, I guess. Would you say that energy levels have come up, you know, presence, cognition, that sort of stuff? Was that better or worse than it was before?
I would say it was better. I think it was probably pretty similar for a few months in,
Mhm.
to previously, and then I would say, when we got into, September, October, um, I definitely felt lighter. I think a lot of some of the joint pain I had disappeared. I think cognition and my energy levels are really stable
Mm.
all day long, as opposed to kind of the peaks and valleys after a big meal or some of those things. But yeah, I would say it's definitely better. And in general, I feel a lot better. My sleep
Oh
is
yeah.
was a lot better. Um, Recently, it's taken a little hit, but I think it'll come back.
It'll come back when we add
And
calories.
yeah, and I think I don't use my CPAP nearly as much. I don't need to.
Oh,
I haven't. I track all obviously everything. I track my sleep. I've been messing with it a little bit. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to use it tonight, and I wake up and I feel just like I wore it. So that's a positive. I think I'll always have a larger neck, but it certainly is nowhere near as big as what it was before. So that's been helpful. I think yeah, I mean it's other than the fact that I'm freezing cold all the time.
yeah.
That's been literally probably the only negative of this entire experience, because I have no visceral fat anymore and I have no insulation, and I still got to be a tough guy on Saturday in Ames, Iowa, in the rain.
I was gonna
So
say Joe lives in Arizona, so being cold is not necessarily something that he's used to. I remember when we visited, people were like, "Yeah, it's like it's the cold season now." I'm like, "It's 95 outside." Like,
oh, that's yeah. And let's provide some context, right? I grew up in Massachusetts. You had the four seasons, freezing cold in the winter, and previous to here, I was at UMass in
Mhm.
Amherst, Massachusetts, where it's snowing all the time. And I've always been a guy that rocks shorts. It is what it is, and I've always been that way here. The heat never really bothered me. The cold never really bothered me. The heat still doesn't bother me, but man, the cold just shreds me now.
Mhm.
I can't even really get in the cold tub very much
Oh wow.
anymore.
Yeah.
It's like jackhammer freezing after 3 minutes. So it's been interesting.
So for anyone who's never dieted to this degree, one of the there's a number of hormonal adaptations and metabolic adaptations that take place. So throughout any dieting period, as your calories come down, as your body fat comes down, you're going to stop moving as much. So you're going to tend to sit more than you stand. You're going to park closer when you're going to the grocery store. You're going to take the elevator instead of the stairs. You're going to I even notice that when I'm really low in my diet, I start whispering and I talk slower. Like it's to that point. So there's these physical adaptations, and there's also the longer you stay in a steep calorie deficit, your testosterone will come down, but more importantly, your thyroid hormones will come down. And when you see those thyroid hormones start to come down, that's when you're going to notice decreased tolerance to cold. That's when you're going to notice the calories have to drop more than they normally would. So, a few things that we did to accommodate for the metabolic adaptations is we put in a step goal for Joe every day. So, that step goal ensures that at least we have some stable amount of movement every day to accommodate for the physical adaptations. We also put in some cardio, and initially it wasn't very much, and we brought it up to a point that was sustainable within his schedule. That's going to be different for everyone. I could pull it up, but I think we're at around 300 minutes a week. 300 minutes a week, 60 minutes 5 days a week. Really not that terrible, or 50 minutes 6 days a week. That's an hour of time. So not everyone has access to that, but that higher level of cardio output allowed Joe to eat more food. If we had to bring his cardio down because his schedule changed, well, we would have had to bring his food down to maintain that calorie deficit. So that's one thing we did. To accommodate for the thyroid issue is the next step to our dieting phase is we're at a point now where the training day and the rest day macros are still in a deficit. So they're both deficits. There's no longer days where he's in a surplus or at maintenance. So what we would implement is high days. So days of surplus eating to kind of ramp up that leptin, ramp up that thyroid hormone, give his body this perception of abundance, and then pull it back. Those can be implemented a number of ways. The way that we're doing it right now is more so, or the way that I actually forget if we put it in or not, but so we're going to do 2 high days per week. And we're going to have the baseline diet be the baseline diet. And those 2 high days per week, he can put them wherever he wants in the week. If you're in a bodybuilding prep scenario, you probably would want to be a bit more strategic with that. Typically, for my bodybuilding clients, I'll try to stack those high days together. So your body has 2 high days in a row prior to pulling it back down. So there's more of an opportunity for that adaptation to occur. As you get steeper into the diet, obviously calories have to come down. So you could either drop the baseline diet down and keep the high days, or you could drop the high days down. It's always a math equation at the end of the day. So whenever I'm adjusting Joe's macros, I take a weekly average calorie number and I try to make sure that whatever modification I make, if the goal is to bring fat down or to bring his weight down, that average weekly calorie number has to come down. And there are a lot of people that get really complex with this. Justin Harris is one who, basically runs his diets like a spreadsheet. And he'll have like high, medium, and low days, but he'll always look at that weekly average calorie. And that's who I got this idea from in the first place, is like the weekly average calories are the ones that matter the most. So it doesn't matter if you have some days eating 4,000 calories and some days eating 2,000, as long as the 7-day total amount of calories drops, you're going to be in a caloric deficit. But from a measurable perspective, when you implement these high low days or these training day rest day diets, what we're noticing with Joe is that body weight fluctuations happen more day to day, because those high carb days, you're going to retain more glycogen. So you're going to retain more water. Then those rest days, you're going to drop back down. So taking a weekly average body weight as your metric is the one that you're going to pay attention to. So did the average weekly body weight come down? Cool. Then I don't care about the daily fluctuations. Has the weighing yourself every day and kind of looking at the scale? I mean, right now I'm looking at your numbers and it's been relatively linear up to this point, but did the fluctuations in daily body weight kind of mess with you at all?
No, not for me. I think that I was pretty aware of why that was occurring. And
Right.
it's not like it was some crazy number either. You're talking about maybe a pound and a half one day or the next
Yeah.
day, you know. Um, and I also understand the physiology as well. So when I have, a big piece of sourdough bread with my protein shake at night, I know that my morning body weight's going to be a little bit higher than it was the previous day when we're at this point, right? So you can kind of see why it's occurring. So it didn't really bother me. Um, and the weigh-ins in general have been really just a metric that I think is important, because at the end of the day, we need that number to slowly, progressively come down over the course of time. And
Mhm.
uh, yeah, it's something that I pretty much did anyway. So it's been fine. I certainly have never seen the scale where it is right now, though.
I mean, for you to sit at
Not since I was
205 pounds.
12.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was dieting for my show, I was sitting around like 212, 214 at like 2 weeks out. And then my coach did like a big calorie drop. And it was around the same time that my training intensity dropped off, because we were planning on tapering into the show. And I guess the big drop in fatigue, I just flushed water like crazy. And I was like 204. I was like,
Yeah.
what in the holy fuck? I haven't been 204 since I was in, second year university.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of a mind fuck. Tell me a little bit about, so we're getting into the final stages here. We're sub 10%. That was initially the goal when we started, but we haven't really hit any roadblocks. And so you and I
Right.
had a conversation of, hey, let's just push this thing until it starts to suck. Let's let it suck for a little bit and then pull back.
Mhm.
How did you make that decision? Like, when we're talking about this, ultimately it's your choice, right? Me as the coach, I'm like, hey, this is the information that we have. I give it to you. I give the agency to the athlete to say, hey, when do you want to stop this? Because you're not going to compete.
Right.
So for you, how does that thought process go?
Yeah, I think our initial discussion of sub 10, it happened. I just haven't had any like real major, like crazy hiccups, and it's been really smooth. And
Yeah.
then I remember, I don't know when it was, but it was a little while ago. You're like, yeah, most people quit around 8. And I was in the back of my head, I'm like, well, fuck that. We're going 8, you know? So, um, that's kind of where I was at, and I don't know if it's going to be 8.2 or 8.9, but,
Yeah.
that was kind of like, all right, like we've gotten to this point. Like I tend to probably go overboard on most things. So let's just do what we do here.
I think it speaks to the whole reason why you started this journey in the first place. Like, let's push into a place that's really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason most people quit at 8 is around 8 is when you start to drag. You start to really have to drag yourself through those workouts, drag yourself through that cardio. Um, I see it a lot with folks that don't have a lot going on. Um, and I think it's just if you have more stuff to do, there's less of a mental focus on the dieting process. Like, would it be safe to say that this diet has just been like software running in the background?
Yeah, I think that's probably an accurate way to explain it.
Yeah.
And I think I haven't really. I mean, this is really the first time I've kind of spoke about it to anybody, in this
Mm,
realm, other than people in the building. Like, what is going on with Joe? Like, is he okay? Like, is he, you know? That's one of the things I probably struggled with the most was people's perception of me as I shrunk, so to speak.
yeah.
And I didn't really tell anybody what I was planning on doing, other than a couple members of my staff. And so when I walk upstairs and I see coaches or, you know, uh, an old player from last year, like I've had more people reach out to me and ask me if I was okay, um, if I'm sick, or if something's going on, or,
That's wild.
um, and that to me was probably the most difficult thing of this whole thing, is that people's perception of me and my perception of myself is this bigger guy,
Mm,
and now I'm not this bigger guy, and no one understands what's actually going on behind the scenes and how hard I'm working on this and the goals that were originally set. And other than, a handful of people that I'm really close with. And so answering all those questions has certainly been interesting. Like, the why are you doing this? Like, what, coach, like what are you doing? Like, why are you trying this? And it's the same thing I explained to you. My answer is always the same. It's just because I want to see if I can.
yeah.
I want to see how far I can go. um
What's been the
that's been
response? What's been the
that's been
response when
hard.
you say that? When you say that to somebody, you're like, I just want to see how far I can take this, how hard I can push.
Yeah, I think it depends on the person. I think some people think, that I'm a psychopath, right?
Yeah.
Like, some people are like, why would you do that? And other people are like, hey man, that's awesome. Like, I love the fact that you're trying to do something that you've never done before and push past some boundaries that you thought maybe you had in your preconceived notions of yourself. And that's been the conversations I tend to drift towards, the ones that are a little bit more positive. But yeah, it's been really interesting, people's response to the way I look now versus the way I looked before.
Have
I've
your
I've had a lot of people, in particular the coaches on staff, be like, "Hey man, you got to tell me what you're doing. Like, I
tell them
need
to
to
give
I
me a
need to
call.
lose weight." Yeah, yeah. I'm like, I know a guy.
I know a guy.
I can help you out. Yeah.
The I find it really interesting that people who are in leadership positions who take on opportunities to seek out discomfort, it to me it's a no-brainer because immediately you earn respect. Because your entire job as a strength and conditioning coach is to stress the systems of every person who walks in your door. So if you're going to say, I'm going to stress my system in a different fashion, the same way I'm asking you to stress your system. To me, that's immediate credibility. Have you seen that with the athletes? Has there been a change in buy-in?
I don't know if there's necessarily a change of buy-in for in my world, just because I feel like because I do try to train so hard
Right.
to your point, right? It's the same thing, it's just a different avenue.
Fair.
You know, training so hard and for, the 16 weeks of the off season, I'm doing what they're doing, like in some way, shape, or form. Like there's some, there's skin in the game that way. So I think I hope that that was present
Right.
um, previously. This is just a different thing, right? And to your point, I think a lot of the guys that are either weight loss guys or weight gain guys or some of the outliers on the team that need to actually make some body composition changes have definitely set, took the time to sit down and be like, all right, like what's working for you? How is this working? Who do I need to, how do I need to leverage this and try to allow some of that information to help them?
I love that. How would you compare the response you're getting to this hard thing as compared to when you were running the marathon or lifting heavy? Because those are also very hard things that you would consider psychopathic behavior.
Right. I think this has been different um, for me because I look so much different.
Fair.
Uh, I think that the preconceived notion of a big, strong strength coach is one that he should be lifting, right? He should be training. I think the endurance piece of it was a completely different thing, um, where you get the people in our world that are like, "Why are you doing that?" Right? You're never gonna satisfy everybody. Everybody's going to think, but at the end of the day, I'm not doing any of this for anybody other than myself
Mhm.
at the end of the day. And I think that's, you know, there's going to be some people that are like, hey, how did you do this? Or they're going to be jealous of the fact that you're doing it, or why aren't I doing this? It's kind of a human mechanism sometimes. And then there's other people that are really happy for you that you are doing it. And I think, um, at the end of the day, as long as I'm happy with what's happening and how it's going, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I speak to my clients about a lot is, and it's something that I've experienced. When you walk into a room and well, I'm 5'10", so I don't really have the height thing going for me. But, when I walk into a room, let's say a conference, for example, and 5'10", 230, shredded, you can see my veins through my t-shirt, and I walk into a conference, that demands a different level of respect than if I'm walking in. So I've always felt that my body's my business card. And while my body might look a certain way, it's only a reflection of how I've fortified my mind. So you mentioned when we first got on the podcast that everyone you've spoken to has said that getting super lean has been the hardest thing they've ever done. How do you feel about that process so far?
Up until this point, I don't think it's been as hard as I thought it would be. Um,
Get ready, buddy.
Now, I am not nearly as lean as probably you were, or a lot of people have got, sitting right around probably 9%, maybe a little bit less than that right now.
Mhm.
Um, but I have visible veins in my abs. I have veins all over in my lats and my triceps. My fat is as low as it's ever been, and there's been a few hiccups, but I think in the beginning when I just said this is what's going to happen,
Mm,
and my mindset was such that I'm just going to do this. Like I've committed to this. I owe it to Paul. I owe it to myself. I owe it to, you know, the commitment that I made, there is no other option. There is no,
Yeah.
it's a mindset thing for me in that that's how I try to live my life. In that, if I commit to something, and in particular, if somebody else is involved in that process, I try to do everything I possibly can to accomplish whatever goals set forward. It's no different than, um, the commitment and the amount of time and effort and mental acuity and capacity that I try to put into training this football team. Each relationship, each individual, the amount of time we spend planning, the amount of effort we put in physically in the moment, in the training sessions. Uh, I get up in the morning because of them, not because I'm some inherently disciplined person. There's days when I don't want to get up at 3:45, and I just do because I know that they need me to get up. And I think I told you that in the beginning, where
Hmm.
um, I always do better when I'm working with somebody that's kind of, they're relying on me a little bit.
Hmm.
And that's part of the reason why I wanted to go down this road with you, is because you got no skin in the game, right? Other than the fact that we're doing this thing together, but you're counting on me, I'm counting on you. Let's just
Yeah.
do it, and that's been the really fun part about this process. Is, for me, we're just doing what we do. You
Yeah.
set the plan, we have discussions, and then I execute the plan. And it hasn't always been perfect, but we just execute the plan, and that's it.
That I think that speaks to something that I've been truly on a soapbox about lately, whether it be on the podcast or in my social media, is this concept of discipline versus identity. And I think that people talk about discipline. You could look at what you've accomplished to date and say, look, man, Joe's so disciplined. But the reality is, as you just mentioned, this is just what you do. You are who you are, and who you are is someone who does hard things. So yeah, there's the opportunity to compare it to the other hard things that you've done. And we know that the hardest thing you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done until you do something harder. And so what you're saying is like, hey, I wake up at 3:45 because I wake up at 3:45, not because I want to, because it's who I am is a person who shows up. And when you implement any sort of challenge into somebody whose identity is already fortified, it becomes so much easier to step up to that challenge. Where I run into challenges with clients is when they're always relying on discipline as opposed to trying to become the person who has already done the thing. So discipline is like, it's a non-renewable resource, man. You will run out of discipline.
Right.
But if your actions are a reflection of who you are, I mean, it's just a matter of time. You just have to put in enough time and you'll get to where you want to go. And I think you've showcased that, tremendously. Um, we're getting into December, we're getting into the holidays. We'll probably push this diet as hard as we can until Christmas, try to get to below that 80% or 8%. Um, what's going to be your first meal that you have when I let you say, hey, take the training wheels off, Big Daddy? Have you
I
thought
don't
about
know.
it?
I don't know. I really haven't. I don't know. It's probably going to be a massive steak, I would say, and um, but that's not like,
Yeah. You've been
you
eating
know,
steak.
yeah, like it's not that crazy of a thing. I've never been one to like love like a giant bowl of pasta or pizza. I might have some pizza.
Okay.
I could do a few slices of pizza or a big giant hamburger or something like that. Um, Definitely something with some fat. I miss the fat, man. That is the most satiating thing for me, and I think that's probably what I miss the most.
Yeah.
Uh, I haven't really, with the exception of a few occasions, had any alcoholic beverages either. I may want a couple of those.
Fair.
Um, but that's also just kind of been par for the course. Like, no, I don't. No, I have a goal. I'm not gonna. Yeah, I
Mhm.
don't need that. You know, I had a glass of wine when I went out with my wife. Right, I told you
Yeah.
about it. I felt bad. You were like, "Listen, what is wrong with you?"
Yeah.
Like, you literally went out to lunch. You went out to dinner with your wife for the first time in like 3 months, and you're sitting here trying to explain yourself. Like, just make up for it on the back end. I'm like, all right, I will.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Just get back on track. I
Yeah.
think I made the mistake my first bodybuilding prep of like watching these food channels and like having a folder of pictures of treats and stuff like that. But one thing people don't realize is the first time you actually eat a
You won't even
significant
be able
amount.
to. Yeah.
No, I remember a post show, I ordered this massive burger. It was like the bun was grilled cheese and it was like four
Mm,
patties with like bacon and all this other stuff. I think I had like 8 to 10 bites and a couple fries, and I was like, I'm full. I want to go have a nap.
yeah.
And that's gonna be it.
That's in the
The-
back of my head too. Like, I don't know, as though I feel like my first, like, quote unquote cheat meal will have to be like 3 or 4 weeks after we're done
yeah.
dieting and we sort of kind of get back into the, because I want to make the most of it. I go to like Heart Attack Grill or something and really do it right, as opposed to you know, eating like a bird for the last month and then trying to go eat a giant steak.
Plus, I mean, the reverse dieting process is, if anyone has never dieted to low body fat percentage, I just went through this with another client of mine. We dieted as the lowest he's ever been. He was definitely sub 8%. This is a guy who grew up his whole life as a fat kid. And so he had veins in his abs. He was loving it. And to get him out of the diet was actually a lot of work on my part because there were so many like pent up emotions and
Mm,
limiting beliefs about food. He's like, man, I'm scared to have a cheat meal, or I'm scared to increase my calories because I don't want to lose what I've built.
right.
But holy shit, when you have gotten that lean and then you start gradually increasing your calories, you get leaner and leaner and leaner. Even though the body weight starts to creep up a little bit, your muscle mass is just a sponge. And if you do it properly, you can gain a significant amount of muscle mass. Your body fat will stay low and you'll just look like a freak. And then the
Yeah,
key is holding that.
I can't wait for that. I kind of, we were talking, I guess probably 2 weeks ago or a week ago, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Hey, man, what is the recomp after this? What does the reverse diet look like? Like, what can I expect in that?"
Mhm.
And in our discussions, I was like, "Look, I don't really want to lose this either. Like, I know I'm going to lose some of it, but like, I don't want to get back up to where I was. Not to say I was inherently fat. What were we, 16%,
Yeah, I
something
think
like
so.
that.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to get back there, but I also want to get back
Yeah.
in the 230s and be, 10, 11, somewhere in there. Like,
Mhm.
how do we do that? Right? How do we accomplish that part, of it? Because, yeah, I'm looking forward to that where, I pick up a, 150-pound dumbbell and it feels like a feather again, and get underneath a bar and move a little bit of weight and feel that just afterburner strength again. That's one thing I am looking forward to.
Yeah, it'll come. I mean, maybe we'll do another podcast, talk about the reverse diet
Yeah.
and what that looks like. But Joe, listen, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to share with me your experiences. I think the audience would really appreciate the perspective of how you've done this as someone who works a very demanding job, is a father, is a husband, and has been able to manage it all. And I think some of the key take homes are, we're going to do this gradually. We're going to choose an approach that actually fits within your lifestyle. We're going to start with habits before we get more refined. And then most importantly, I think it's leaning into who you are, your identity as someone who pushes into discomfort and does hard things. And it just becomes a matter of execution. So I really appreciate you coming on and having this chat with me.
No, thank you, man. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. There's no doubt. And your coaching process with me has been really flexible and really just cooperative. And I think that I really appreciate it because I feel like I'm on the precipice of being, close to
Mhm.
what we set out to do, and I can't wait to get there. And you're the best, brother.
Appreciate it, man. We'll have to get back out to Arizona and visit you again.
Yes, I know you like the way you look out here in the 95-degree heat all day.
Oh, dude,
So
it was
you got your
great.
veins flowing
Oh
all
yeah,
over.
it was sick. It was
Maybe
sick.
post a picture of your quad. It looked like the fucking Nile River with tributaries coming off everywhere.
That's
Yeah.
the plan. Hopefully, I've been waiting for that point. I've been doing a lot of endurance training and a lot of cardio, and I'm like, everyone told me I was going to get weak, and everyone told me I was going to get small, and I'm over here sitting at like 230. I'm like, that's not happening yet, guys.
Yeah, I ran my marathon at 2:45. And I was still strong and I was still able to run that far. And, that was an 18-week training plan too. Like
Oof, that's
that
quick.
was a long, long road because um I just didn't have any experience running that far, logging those miles. And at the same time, I'm trying to hang on to this strength because I
Mhm.
wanted to squat 500 and then run the marathon on the same day, which, two conflicting stimuluses. But you're kind of doing something similar right now. You're moving big weights still when you need to, and you're logging miles, and it's kind of an
Yeah,
interesting thing.
I just got to make sure that I don't strain my calf running a turkey trot again. That was
Yeah, I saw that.
Dude,
Yeah,
I
man.
was so mad because my wife and I were running it together and we both said, "Hey, listen, we're going to do it sub 25 minutes." And we were hitting the paces, everything was good, and then some dude jumped in front of me. I was like,
Boom.
"Just my luck." I was talking to a buddy of mine. I'm like, "Man, like I feel like I'm in the best shape I've been in since I was playing college basketball. This is awesome." And then life just gives you that subtle reminder that you're almost 40.
Yep.
Like,
The calf was always a struggle for me. I being as big
mm,
as we are and running, the calves take a beating, and I had to be really, really diligent with a lot of the things I did from a warm up perspective before I ran and from a rehab perspective after I ran for that lower leg because I did the same thing. I ran into some problems with that calf during training, and they're finicky, man. It takes a minute to get them back to 100%. And
mm.
but yeah, brother, yeah, you can do whatever you want to do. That's for damn sure.
Appreciate you, man. Have a fantastic day. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. We'll catch you on the next one.
Sounds good, brother.